I'm Matt Mahler with MovieWeb. It is a real pleasure to speak with you. Been a fan for a very long time, and this is a super cool film. It juggles a lot. I know it was written during COVID, so there's that idea of separation, but it also reminds me of, dating in the digital age a lot. And then there's also these themes of PTSD and war and just this very cool idea. Was there one aspect of it, or location, or idea of the script that excited you most about directing it?
It was two things really. In the years in 2021, I'd fallen in love around the COVID and just before the COVID era and got married in 2021. So the romance and the romantic story I really related to two people who are sort of forced at a distance to, connect with each other, and they start to connect and then to have to really fight to be together. That was very much my experience with my wife, and that was very moving. But then on top of that, the fact that it went into so many interesting genres and was blending genres and more genres maybe than any script I'd ever read, that was both frightening, but also became the reason that I wanted to make it, because it wasn't a sequel, it wasn't franchise, it wasn't IP, and it was trying to do something, and I think successfully doing it, that I had not seen, which is blend all those genres into one good narrative film.
It's fascinating. It's a very bifurcated movie. And you need that slow bonding and that love that develops until it just drops you into hell. And I haven't been so disturbed in a while as that scene with him in the tree. I won't spoil it, but everything that happens. I guess in the very early draft I read of the script, he had fallen and broken his arm, and there wasn't this body horror stuff going on. How did all that come about? These bugs, these growing things, and
Carnivorous tree roots,
yeah, exactly. I love all of it, the design. How did all that develop, and what did you draw from to create that vision of this?
That was the main thing that my partner Cargill and I rewrote. We wrote probably a third of the script, and what I felt was that Zach's script was really good, structurally really good. It's still the movie that I made, but that the promise of the Gorge was so high when I read the script, and then when I got down there, it was a little too much like a straight zombie movie. And so when I decided to do the movie, I was clear with him and with the studio, I want to redo the mythology that's down here. It needs to be more visually interesting. It needs to be original. It needs to be surprising and deliver on the promise of the mystery that the script builds so well. And for that, we tried to do things that maybe people haven't seen before.
Yeah, and I think it works very well. It's terrifying and it has all these different things. Did you draw from any sort of visual styles like Bosch or even The Keep, the Michael Mann film, I think sometimes? This is so distinct, but with all these different genres, all these different styles coalescing, did you pick and choose from anything you personally love as a filmmaker?
The only thing that I drew from specifically had to do with kind of the audacity of the color palette, namely the dense saturated color of the mist. That's very much out of, inspired by the color audacity of Italian giallos, Bava and Argento. But I also knew I would only do that if the color of that mist had a story point, which it does. The reveal of why those separate colors exist is very clear by the time by the time they're on their way out of the gorge. But the rest of it was not really drawn in other movies, because again, I felt like what it had to be was a mythology that we don't get a lot of, and what we drew on and what we ultimately landed on was uh, uh, folk horror, and the idea of natural, especially forest horror, in classic folk horror, the idea of plant people and sentient trees, and the DNA of, there's a little bit of the fly there, I guess, with DNA bug hybrid stuff that you get a little bit of, but for the most part, it was this idea of the DNA hybrid blending with, you know, fauna, flora, insect, and to use that to develop imagery that we haven't seen before. I mean, and then it gets really extreme by the time you get to the bridge, and I won't give away what that is, but you know, you're seeing an outgrowth of something where you feel like, man, this is really messing with God here. What this stuff is doing, and I think that was the goal. It was to satisfy sci-fi and horror fans with something that was fresh. And you know, The Ritual is a great movie. Day of the Triffids is a great movie. There have been a few movies that have played with some of these ideas, but not a lot of them.
It's unforgettable imagery, grounded in emotion. And I know you've said something along the lines of that by the time the Gorge was finished, you were encouraged that the actors from Black Phone would be of age for a high school coming of age sort of
Yeah,
movie. I know
yeah.
how personal the first film was for you. Was it cathartic at all to make that, and were you hesitant to return to that with a sequel? And why, beyond the fact that they're older now?
It was extremely cathartic making that movie, and it really felt like it was bringing closure to some years of work I had done in therapy, and really just reckoning with my own childhood. I think that finishing that movie sort of marked the end of that internal journey that I had been taking to to reckon with and face up to what I had experienced as a child in terms of violence specifically. And then, you know, what got me excited about doing the sequel was that at first I had no interest in doing it. Joe Hill gave me an idea, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I could build something out of that. That got me considering it. But then when I realized if I did make a big movie first, which I did in the Gorge, then those kids would be in high school. And the idea of making a sequel that's a high school horror movie, in the same way that the first one was a middle school horror movie, that was exciting because I've never made a real high school horror movie, and it would allow me to, it would almost demand me to be more aggressive, get into more, you know, specific kinds of violence, and to return to these characters and see who they had become as a result of their experiences in the first movie was also really interesting to me. I love the characters. I also love all the actors. And as we went to work on the script, I think it's a great idea and it really works. We finished shooting it last week, and I can't wait for to finish the film and to put it out in the world.
Yeah, I mean, the original is incredible. It was the last movie I saw in theaters with my dad. It's very special to me. I imagine you can't convey how The Grabber returns in any way now.
I have to comment on that last thing you just said. You know, the last movie I saw with my dad, which is 21 years ago, was in Theater 9 at the Century 16 in Aurora, which is the theater where the Aurora shooting happened. And I saw the two towers with him there. And that's always got, I just, when you said that, I just, man, my heart just like skipped a beat because I know what that means, you know, to have that last movie that you see with your dad. So I didn't hear anything you said after that.
Yeah. That's interesting, though. The two towers reminds me of the trees and the living nature in a way too.
Oh
Of
yeah, yeah, that's probably one of the only movies I can call back to and say that was certainly an influence in some ways to do a mutated, grotesque, somewhat more insect infested psychedelic version of that. You know, that was what we were
yeah.
doing.
Thank
Yeah.
you for sure. That's beautiful. You remember the theater number. Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, I imagine you can't reveal how the grabber returns in any way. No,
Of course not. No, I've given you all the information on Black Phone 2 that you're gonna get.
understood. Totally understood. Um, it seems like you're in this really great period of your life. I mean, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but therapy and love and these great films back to back. Would you, I mean, I don't know how stressful it was to do Doctor Strange. I know there was a little break after that. Is that something you want to return to, the superhero genre, or are you not looking back on that at all at this point in your life?
I mean, I would never say never to anything. I don't look, I'm not looking back at any of my movies or, in that respect. I really finish a movie and then I let it go and then I kind of don't think of it as mine anymore. Then it belongs to the audience. It has the life that it wants to have. Um, but I'm just of the mindset that I need to, I make films one film at a time, and I have since Sinister. I don't think strategically. I really am dedicated to, at any given time, making the film that I feel connects to my life personally at the moment, at the time that I'm making it, and that is the best film that I could possibly make at that time, regardless of how convenient it is or how strategically smart it is. I basically make each movie as though it will be my last one, because one day it will be.
I think that's the healthiest approach. And I guess finally, I mean, I love the music in the Gorge. Reznor and Ross are just, they must have clones. I don't know how they do it. And also the soundtrack, the Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs, um, the version of All Along the Watchtower that's there. When did that come together? And where did those choices come from?
Well, all the needle drops and the Ramones, those are all choices that I made, that I felt were right for those scenes. I wanted there to be a real dance number instead of a sex scene. It was kind of more of a sex scene in the script, and I was like, that's not romantic enough. I want to stretch it out and have a when was the last time you saw a real romantic dance scene in a movie? Um, but I think that, Reznor and Ross, they're the best, and they're my favorite composers. And they read the script, really liked it. And when we zoomed together, I said to them, I said, you guys are my favorite composers, and the reason why is because your score, the score you do for each movie, isn't just bolstering the image. It's not just reinforcing what's already up there on the screen. It's not just adding to the emotion that you're supposed to be feeling in a scene. Instead, their scores are always adding a third thing that's not there. Like there's the sound design, and then there's everything in the picture, and those two things make the movie. But then the score comes along, and here's a third thing, and the movie would not be the same thing without it. It's adding a component, it's adding a layer that broadens what the movie is. And I said, and that's what I want for this movie. I want it to be a third thing. It's not just bolstering the picture. And Trent asked me, he said, well, what do you think that third thing is? How could you describe it? And I said, I think it's the soul of the movie. I want the score to be the soul of the movie. There's a lot of plot, there's a lot of emotional romance and backstory and visual design, but the soul of it, it's in there. But I want the score to be there, and that's really what they wrote, and they're so collaborative, and boy, they're very dedicated. They probably came to more mixes than any other composers I've ever worked with. They don't just phone it in; they really do the work.
Yeah, that's how I would describe a lot of Lynch's films, David Lynch. And I know Reznor worked on some of those with him too. There's a transcendence there, like when Lost Highway, when Lou Reed comes on and she gets that. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyways,
it's so, that moment is so fantastic. And by the way, that's my
oh,
favorite. That's my very favorite David Lynch film. I've seen it a dozen times, or at least half a dozen times. But I just have to say, like, my favorite moment in the movie, directorially, is when they walk through what I call the Bone Tree Wasteland. When everything, all the mist turns purple, and they walk through that graveyard of old trees that are weirdly hybrid with extra large skeletons, and they all look old and dead, and you don't even know what that is. There's just like this human tree trunk suffering thing, and the score that plays during that was the first piece of music that they gave me, and I was like, this music is incredible. So that piece of music laid on top of that image, that takes us all the way into the town, is probably my favorite just for me personally, directorially. That's probably my favorite beat, and that's when he quotes the T.S. Eliot poem,
yeah.
about the world will not end. It doesn't
Yeah.
end with a bang, but with a whimper. Um, you know, I think that there's something about that scene and their score and those images that are so wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I agree. It's fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I could talk about this all day, but I will let you go. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you.